Good morning. The sessions this morning and the keynote, they were amazing, very inspirational to hear about the ambition. Our panel here is with the people in the field who are trying to make this operationally happen. And we're going through the topics of the CEO agenda, which was released earlier this year in Davos. There are 4 key priorities that are the core priorities that we want to tackle: supply chain traceability, combating climate change, efficient use of water, energy and chemicals, and a respectful and secure working environment. And as we also just heard in the session before, the good news is that the pulse score has improved, but progress has slowed by a third. So with those priorities being defined on the CEO agenda, why is it that progress is so slow? And what can we do to accelerate this? And really, there is no one better than my panelists here with me today to address this question. So I'd like to kick us off with Jennifer. Jennifer Silberman is in charge of corporate responsibility at Target. And I would like to ask you, Jennifer, what have you seen in the industry with regards to the main improvements year over year, based on your experience, based on your work in the field?
Well, great. Well, thank you for asking. I think we've really started off with some very clear water and energy efficiency programs that we've implemented in our factories. So whether that's the Clean by Design by the Apparel Impact Institute in partnership with them, and really thinking about how we expand and scale that, to the work that we've been doing in Vietnam with the Vietnam Improvement Project and the IFC. And that's really laid a foundation for us as we set to really rethink our climate strategy and our climate goals. What would be the, we had a Scope 1 and Scope 2, but really spent the last year working on Scope 3, where 96% of our emissions are actually found, right? So it was really about building that foundation, understanding the analysis of where we could have the greatest impact, and really thinking about the way that we needed to work with our supply chain in order to be able to deliver on that. So earlier this year, we actually updated our Scope 1 and Scope 2 goals for an absolute reduction of 30% across Scope 1, 2, and 3 to a 2017 baseline by 2030. But I think what's even more exciting, and really I think part of the theme of today in this collective action and collaboration, is we committed to working with 80% of our supply chain to help them set Scope 1 and Scope 2 goals by 2023. And so again, incredibly ambitious, but recognizing that if 96% of our emissions are actually found in the supply chain, we have to really work together with them in order to be able to scale these energy efficiency projects and water efficiency and chemical work that we've already been doing to affect that change.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it really cuts, I think that's a big round of applause. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's interesting to see how this cuts across the different priorities. It starts with supply chain traceability. It is about energy efficiency, water use, and it is the foundation to really address climate change in a collaborative way. I want to move maybe to Harsh. Harsh, you are in charge of sustainability at Li Fung, and you've done some amazing work in this field as well. What are the main improvements that you have seen?
Over the last few years, because of the role we play in the supply chain, where we work with our customers, the big brands and the retailers, and then also with the factories and the supply base, we've really been looking at, there's a lot of really great things being done. We're all trying many different things to make improvements. How do we accelerate and scale up? And you can't do it one by one by one. So we really started to look at how to utilize technology and really help to sort of push the changes in using technology that's available to everybody, upstream and downstream. And one of the areas we really focused on and have made really a lot of improvement in is the development of virtual sampling. So we know there's so much waste created in many, many different ways through the way sampling has been done traditionally. And so we've just moved that into a technology-based solution, which is incredibly realistic, which was done with the help of a Hollywood studio, so you can imagine how good it is. And that has had a massive impact, which we're tracking. I think we'll be able to show some research later on this year in terms of addressing timelines. So, timelines have to be shortened all the time. So we've been able to do that with the use of this technology with the virtual sampling. It's had a big impact on our carbon footprint. We're not shipping samples around all over the world every other day. And most critically, it's addressed a big area of waste that's being produced through not just sampling, but because of the way it's being used now, we can actually do better forecasting, and therefore you have much more, you know exactly how much you need, and there isn't leftover inventory anywhere. So we're addressing the waste at the sampling level, but also at the sales level, at the retail end as well. So there should be, inevitably, the result should be there should be less waste there as well. So it's a kind of a full loop approach there, but really focusing on how we can utilize that at the upstream and downstream end. And it's particularly important to work with our suppliers and be able to provide them with that kind of technology to be able to take part in where the global industry is going in terms of managing our carbon footprint and waste generally.
Yeah. That's an amazing example of how technology really can bring the sustainability dimension and the business dimension hand in hand. And I have to say, the discussion on virtual sampling, the industry has been, at least many examples I know, this is a discussion for many, many years already, and it really seems this is now
finally happening.
Reaching an inflection point. Thank you for that. Dorte, you're in charge of sustainability at Bestseller. Share with us your thoughts. What have you seen as substantial improvements in the industry year over year?
Well, taking it from the inside, from our company, if we take an area such as traceability, for instance, we've spent enormous amount of time getting deeper into our supply chain. We are getting to know what material suppliers are we working with, how can we transform those materials into better ones, knowing what tier one suppliers, how are they actually performing. And of course you need to know that in order to address the risk and the issues, and also to make those improvements that Jennifer was referring to. So for instance, rolling out the HIG index has been a major priority for us the last couple of years. We've now rolled out and verified the HIG index throughout up to 60% of our business in tier one and starting in tier two now. So it gives us incredible good data to be able to say, okay, where are we performing well and where do we need to improve? And I think what is being in this business for many years, what is really encouraging to see is that suppliers are starting to take on this agenda on their own. I think we see some suppliers coming into the game now that are even more advanced than some of our as brands. So it's, and I see our buyers and sources, they are looking for those suppliers because they can serve them with better products and better sustainability performance. Concretely, we've also put very specific targets down, also publicly, that we want to incentivize suppliers with good performance in sustainability. So we're quantifying that now. We want to put our money where our mouth is. So, place business with suppliers that are performing well. From an industry perspective and traceability, I mean, being part of Fashion for Good, I think it's very encouraging to see the innovation that is happening, the technology that we need in order to create a much more efficient way of doing traceability. today, I mean, recently we just launched the program from Fashion for Good with tracing cotton all the way back to the field through blockchain technology. I think these are the technologies that we need to adopt in order to be doing it in an efficient way. We've done it through Excel sheets, we've done it through asking questions in emails. It's pretty hard work to get to know who you're dealing with. So we need a much more efficient system for that.
Well, thank you. And I think there's a perfect bridge to Baptiste with the Higg Index, and Baptiste in charge of, well, many things, I would say, at the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Share with us from a bird's eye perspective, what have you seen as main improvements in the industry?
Yes, thank you, Katrin. So indeed, if we look at what were the reasons that still could allow some sections of the industry to be able to move forward, if we a bit unpack what those reasons could be, I think that actually you name one of the reasons. When you talk about, for instance, the use of the Higg Index, or in the coalition, we're everything about measurement. And as was reminded this morning, you treasure what you measure. So the moment that we could witness a big number of organizations that actually could join collaborative platform like the coalition, they could instantaneously benefit of the immense knowledge that was put into those tools, those methodology, and the experience that was gathered by all of those leaders that initially created those platforms, and that can finally be disseminated to other sections of the industry, SMEs or other organizations that without collaborative effort would not have had the means to be able to make the progress that we witness today. So I think today, by already seeing this segment of the supply chain moving forward and those type of brands moving forward, we have kind of, again, an illustration of the business case of the meaning of collaboration and how collaboration can really enable those players to move forward. That's one of the elements. And then also seeing at collaboration, there is also another space of collaboration that happened in the last years and 2 years, which is also, and what that was again illustrated by some of the panelists we had earlier, which is also governments that came into the dance in a certain way more actively. So we saw the UK Parliament taking a lot of stand. We saw the Dutch and the German government actually also creating platform where untouched SMEs also that were not prior to this conversation, part of this discussion, now could discuss and enable and deploy some programs there. And also the European Parliament starting to go to this direction. So I think that also by having first collaboration within the industry happening more, and also governments taking a stronger and more clear stand towards sustainability, that really enables more players to come and hence to have a progress in this segment of the industry.
I think, thank you, Baptiste. It's interesting that you both point out the importance of traceability and the measurement dimension of it. And I personally also feel that in 2018, it's a year also of convergence in this case of measurement dimensions and approaches and methodologies with the SLCP moving forward. And traceability and understanding your supply chain is such an important foundation.
Yeah,
and all other dimensions that...
And to do it in a collective way, I know we've heard that word many times this morning, but it really doesn't make sense that we all go out there with individual asks. We have to align our standards. We are killing the suppliers with, audits, etc. And we have to be careful not to do the same with requirements for traceability, for instance, or the data needs we have. So it's critical that we move together here.
Yeah. So we've made some progress, but that progress was slow. And I guess the big elephant in the room is, this progress is particularly slow if you look at the large organizations, which all of you are representing. Why do you think has this progress stalled? What's blocking it, and what are the main challenges? And maybe Harsh, you want to start with that?
Multiple challenges. I think there's an economic issue here that has to be addressed. A lot of the suppliers are really struggling to stay afloat. So I think, as Dorte just said as well, is coming together and having one approach to how we work with suppliers is much better than having multiple different types and different companies' approaches around various, how to address various issues. So we have that issue to deal with in the sort of macro scale of what's going on in the world. On the other hand, I don't think it's slowed. I think, as some of our very esteemed speakers pointed out this morning, the big companies are doing a lot. And I would say that there needs to be some residency period for when you've embarked on something that's big, that's scaled, and is impacting a lot of the supply chain from our perspective. We need to give a little bit of time to let people be able to really embed it into their operations. And I would say that the HIG is a huge example of this. When you see the amount of factories, suppliers that are going on to this every single day. I mean, we ourselves, last year, 600 or so went onto the HIG. This year, we've already passed the 600 mark in the middle of the year. And that's
amazing.
That's a very big step. So, kudos to all the work that Baptiste and his team do. So I don't think it's slowed as such. I just think that there is a little bit of a, let's just get this right, let's really look at the data, what are the improvements we need, what are this one standard that we're all starting to converge around, and really have very impactful and demonstrable targets being set against it. And I think there's a lot of coming together around that. So I'm not sure it's slowed. Maybe just our data, I think, will show something different next year.
And it's not only about piloting, but it's about scaling and rolling.
And embedding and really getting to grips with what's really important and what has that impact.
I think also most of these challenges are large systemic challenges, right? And companies, any kind of individual organization is just one element within a large system. And so you really have to kind of, again, what all our speakers this morning talked about, this collective action, this collective of the willing, but it's also within the system, where are the breakage points, right? Where are basically the fault lines? Actually, how are you looking at the system in totality and beginning to collectively address where all the companies or all the organizations can be really focused on going after those things? Again, we know what those are. It's really, again, kind of coming in these pre-competitive, collaborations, which I think are so critical and are really the unlock in a lot of this work, that for most of these issues, the way we address it is not a competitive advantage, right? It's actually a competitive disadvantage if we're actually not addressing them together. The question is, how then do you market it? How do you then present it to your guests? How do you do things that are intuitive to your brand? That's the competitive advantage. But all of this work to help the system basically reach its potential, that's where we all need to work together.
Thank you. You want to add on that?
Yes, and just to build on that, at the same time, I think if we still want to see even more progress happening, so indeed, we need to give more time. We still first there is many seeds that have been planted, and in order for them to provide good fruits, we need to have the time for the tree to grow and to be solid and robust. At the same time, there is a couple of things in the ecosystem that we still haven't unleashed and that we still need to happen to be able to move definitely the needle further. First, for instance, when the coalition was created, there was really the theory that also you will be able to move forward when you will have transparency happening. When not only you will know the information, but when you will also share this information more globally so that you can be more accountable for the actions you are taking, and that therefore this can be one of the drivers of change. So this also, the moment that in the ecosystem will be enabling transparency, this will also be one of the forces that will be eventually happening to make the thing move forward nicer. We also know that we need some other players to come into the play, like retailers and others that have a force to drive the change that we need to see happening. And eventually also governments that even if they start to do something, I think by redefining the relationship between the industry and governance, we can really create an amazing dynamic that ultimately can again bring the industry and the leaders a level higher.
Yeah, and what we've learned this morning with the upcoming G7 summit, bringing politicians, bringing the big companies together is very promising. You've touched upon a big chunk of companies not being part of this sustainability journey yet. And we heard earlier it's 40% indeed that have not yet really taken action. Why have they not started yet? Dorte, what do you think and what advice would you give them?
Well, I think just get on with the task in a practical way, right? Don't... It can be a very
act.
Yeah, it can be a very overwhelming task joining a fashion summit here, hearing all about the challenges, etc. I think starting with what you can do, ask questions, be curious. We see in our organization that curiosity sparkles more, then you get to learn more, and then you start act, because you cannot not act when you know what's happening. So I think that's key, and those collaborative efforts that we are doing here, I think they will benefit that part of our business and industry, because I don't think we need a lot more coalitions, industry associations, etc. We need action, and we are coming together in the right forums, the Zero Discharge, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, the Better Cut Initiative. We have all the initiatives there. They just need to embark on the journey.
Last piece of advice
Well,
for
I
the
would also
starters?
say, I think Paul said it really well, right? We're not in service just for our organization. We're in service sort of for this collective good. So I think for a lot of these organizations that have already led the way, it's our responsibility as much to bring up the other companies and to help them, basically let them leapfrog in some ways to where we are now based on the decades of learnings that we had. And again, there's so many forums and organizations that can help facilitate that. But I think we have a collective responsibility if we're going to be able to solve the challenges.
Well, that's a beautiful summary. So I think our time is up. I would like to ask you to join me in thanking this amazing panel.